Jazz, conversational improv through life, leadership, and Jesus. We are going to just talk quickly today about the subversive nature of the gospel, especially how we see that in the Christmas story. We were just talking about, we know that there's so many different church structures, and it's tough, right? There's always a balance, because it's good to have a curriculum, right? It's good to have a plan. Yeah. It's good to have programs, but when that program maybe becomes the end-all, be-all, right? Well, did you go to this class? And now we have the level 2 class, or we have...
Because it's good to progress in your relationship with Christ and with others, because there shouldn't be this sense that I'm the same Christian I was when I got, when I was 18 years old. I mean, if you're the same, then you're doing something wrong. You're not engaged.
And Paul says that, right? You're still drinking milk when you should be on to the steak and the meat of things. But do I need a Sunday school button? Or 10?
The pins look like
Boy Scout patches. We had caravans. That was Christian version of Boy Scouts growing up in the Church of the Nazarene. We had caravans.
Okay.
We got scarves or sashes, depending on what age group you were in, and we got patches on there for things. That's right.
Please tell me you have that stuff still.
It might be at my parents' house somewhere.
Man, you got to dig that out.
And here's the struggle, right? Because I think, by and large, right, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But that is kind of a worldly system.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily, can I say, a biblical system? Can I say it? Can I say
always point us back to the Bible.
Can I say that? And to me, and I wonder too, we're going to tie everything into this, I guess, is that part of the deconstruction thing too, of people going, well, I don't know where I fit in.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? I've been at this for 10 years and I should be here, but I'm not at this level. I feel like I'm... And so...
And there's some tension, I think, that exists in, using some of those worldly systems. Because the church, in its history, has had this pattern of taking the practices of the world and redeeming them by using and incorporating them into the kingdom, right? And that's actually a point where people tend to get a little... You could choose to interpret that one of two ways: redeeming or co-opting, right? People who don't, there's Christmas is a perfect example, right?
Yes.
The church,
we have a tree set up in our
thousands of years ago, or hundreds of years ago, right? Yeah.
It's a beautiful tree. I love it. It's pretty. Yeah.
Took pagan practices or winter solstice and said, we're going to celebrate Christ, And the Christian story is that's the church redeeming culture, and the world looks at that and says, no, you're just co-opting it, right?
Yeah.
So, there's some tension that exists there in how we do those practices, but I think what part of it that, what it comes down to is the posture we take when we're doing those things. If it's about status and our worth, our piety is associated with that status, there's, thinking through how we use those practices, right?
And I keep coming just back to the martial arts things. That's just kind of the world I'm in right now. And it's one of those things where you go, there's a belt system, right? No matter what martial arts, but those belt systems are for in the gym, right? You know what I mean? I'm just, that's why this is improv, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you wear that, when you leave the gym, that you're like, well, I've got my purple belt on, and so everybody in the grocery store better respect me. But we see it again, right? I have Christian T-shirts, right?
Yeah.
Got the Christian hats. We wear the necklaces and the earrings, or the bumper stickers on our cars. We flick people off because they
Christian earrings.
What crosses? Whatever, dude. So it is one of those things where you go, yeah, there's a worldly system to those things, but a lot of times that ranking system or whatever is for within a certain context. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the position that we take.
Well, and sometimes too, in using those systems, it becomes very easy to look at spiritual growth as things to be achieved, right? Markers, levels to meet, and that it's a linear progression. And if you're not progressing, right, then you're not. Again, it's how we understand worth and status, those things. But you're failing to meet the mark as a disciple because you're not when the reality is discipleship is not this, right? It's not necessarily linear. It can be very zigzagging and backwards and circling back on things. And I mean, for us in the holiness tradition, that's kind of inherent in our holiness theology. Now, we don't always articulate it well. We don't always practice this. But the reality is, in a holiness theology, our belief is we have surrendered our lives to Christ. He is sanctifying us. He is making us holy. And sometimes that means, hey, bonehead, remember we dealt with this? Remember we kind of put this on the cross and you need to revisit? I mean, it's not always a one and done, kind of thing.
It's not stair steps.
Exactly. And so but we like systems. We like things that, because then I can point to you and say, well, see, this is what it looks like to be a Christian. See, here's the tick marks, and you're not meeting the tick marks, therefore you're out or you're in.
And I get to say this to you because I am further down on the list of what I've accomplished.
And we can determine who's out, who's in, who's just, who's unjust, who's righteous, who's unrighteous, what's good and what's bad. And there's no need for nuance.
No,
right? No need for some unique stories to say, I mean, this is exactly what the evangelical church, how we've understood salvation, right? You have to pray this prayer, this sinner's prayer. Have you prayed the sinner's prayer? Have you done the, and no, it's not biblical.
Have you gone down to the altar or something that looks like an altar?
Right.
Have you knelt somewhere? Have you sat down someplace? And
what you don't see, perfectly, exactly you said, it's not biblical. And it's not biblical in the sense that not once in Scripture do you really see people's faith in God, right, or their righteousness being derived from a prayer they prayed or some kind of, and it might come with a confession, but it's a confession that's always backed up with an action, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, all the way back to Abraham, right? Leave this place.
Yeah.
Right? And his righteousness was derivative of his obedience and willingness to follow after God. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see all through into the church, right? Christian discipleship is not based upon only a confession, right? Or a prayer we've prayed.
Yep.
But those stories don't always look the same. You can't apply, this is what this person did, therefore this is what it looks like for everybody. You don't even see that in Scripture.
Yeah. And this is part of the subversive, subtle, messy nature of the path of following Christ. This is something we've been talking about on Sundays, the subversive nature of the message of Jesus arriving the way that he does. He arrives he is born of a peasant girl who has no status, no rights. No, she can't own anything. She has no voice in society outside of a small group of other women. She's not married. She is going to marry a poor carpenter. Jesus doesn't arrive with fanfare and
not in the capital city of Jerusalem.
No, not in the capital city of Jerusalem. In the shadow of the temple of Herod, no less. So,
people who take notice as shepherds, right, who aren't given any real meaningful place in society, right? They are
foreign wise men, right, that see the star and start their journey.
A couple of years later,
see that star, and I think they start walking.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, but it's the same thing, right?
They just weren't in the stable.
Don't get me started on nativity figures. That's a trigger warning for me.
What are your thoughts on the drummer boy? Never mind. No. Never mind.
You really want to go there? Yeah.
I used to joke with
derail this podcast real quick.
I used to joke with Pastor,
burn the drummer boy ornaments. Okay,
with
sorry.
Pastor Terry when she was here about putting the wise men for their nativity in the yard over in her neighbor's house.
Yeah.
Let's see if anybody got it.
Yeah.
BethlehemStar.com, right? Just plug that real quick. Rick Larson, that's great.
Is it a conspiracy theory?
No, it's fantastic. It's conspiracy. Jiminy Christmas. Rick Larson, Bethlehem Star. Okay.
You're trying to get an advertisement.
You can watch it free on YouTube, or if you want to sponsor his ministry, I think for $10 you can buy the DVD or whatever. So DVD. Who still watches those? I don't know, but
if you're able to give $10, have him give it to us.
I haven't given him $10. I'm just but let's go back to the subversive way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that to me, that's what. Boy, I don't want to take this in a whole nother direction too, but like, we struggle with this with church membership, right? Like, so do we actually have some sort of covenant piece of paper where we have you sign something, put your name down, I give you a card? Right? We baptize people. We give them a baptismal certificate, which again, I think is good. It's fun, but it's like, is there anybody checking at the door if you got your baptism certificate with you?
And this doesn't give you any extra rights when you come into the church or when you get to heaven.
Would that be a baptism passport?
But where was this? Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, I was distracted by the toothpaste or whatever is on these papers.
It's wax, I think. Where was I going? Oh, but I had somebody years ago in our church who I hate even putting these labels on it, but more of that libertarian mindset that says, my attendance and again in my church system, I don't know who gives or what they give, but he says, my attendance and my giving should be enough indication, right, of where my allegiance lies, right? That it doesn't need to be a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. I don't need to sign, and again, not that if it came down to that, I don't know if he would or wouldn't, but and so it's one of those things, right? It's this messy, right? It's this subversive thing of, dude, I'm showing up, right? I'm on the team, right? I'm given to the church. I'm given to the missions. Mm-hmm. I'm on board. I don't necessarily know if I need a piece of paper or a pen or a colored belt, right? Or a T-shirt or something
or earring,
or really hung up on the earrings, aren't you? Sorry, I just threw it out there. I don't know. But yeah, right. It's a baby in a manger in a small town.
Yeah. Because let's be honest. You want to talk about something that's subversive and messy. Submessy.
Some messy.
That's
a weird
so
word.
Messy. Talk about something that's subversive and messy. We don't have anything about Jesus as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I don't care. That's fine. I'm fine with that. That's not a part of the Bible. But I can't wait to sit there with Jesus and find out what was teenager Jesus like, acne Jesus. What was that like? Because the truth is that if we are willing to believe that Jesus is all human, then he went through that. Mm-hmm. He went through that. I think about my teenage years and was like, dang, I'm glad I'm not that anymore.
Sure.
That's messy.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow, God saw fit to allow that to happen. And if that happened for Jesus and there was meaning to it, what is the meaning for the subversive, messy nature of our existence right now? Kind of redeeming the moments day by day. If today matters, then it matters.
Yeah.
So why? Why does it matter? Why is today important? In all of its messiness and all of its grief and sorry, because here's part of the problem. If our relationship with God is built off of a system that allows us to progress and we get to go, hey, look at the gold star that I just won. Look at the list of accomplishments and the badge that I get to wear and all that kind of stuff. If it's about that, then it is too easy to disregard the messy crap that goes on from day to day. And if I could just get to tomorrow, because tomorrow I get the gold star. Tomorrow I get the accomplishment. I get the thing where people recognize what I did. Today sucks, so I'm just going to get through today. But we don't see Jesus doing that.
We youth group on Sunday night, and I don't mean to toot my horn, I guess, with my kids. But again, teachable moments, right? We had some new kids come and Christmas party, whatever, and there was a particular kid that was sitting by themselves, and I called my daughter over, and I said, why don't you have that student come sit at your guys' table, and again, she gladly did, and but we talked about that on the way home, right? I said, look, this is what it means to be a Christian, right? Right, and again, right, there's no gold star, there's no pin that you got, there's no belt. If you go, this is what we do, right? We try to look out for people, try to include them, right? This is how we act. right? This is how we should carry ourselves. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's just that in those moments, right? Because these are the type of people we're trying to become, you know.
Well, it's certainly very easy, too, if we're looking at these systems or structures or programs or whatever to put into place to be the markers and indicators of our development. It's very easy to disassociate mature Christian behavior with having checked these boxes or attained these things, right? I don't have to deal with my Christ-likeness because I've passed the Sunday school exam. Right? And that's, I mean, honestly... And so that's the flip side in the holiness tradition, right? Our confession that we are being sanctified, that God is doing this work, and we to continue to revisit these things. The flip side to it is it has been looked at and we've said, well, here's the list of things we either do or the much greater list, the things we don't do, right? And our piety is measured by our abstinence. We don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't... was the old saying, right?
We don't drink, smoke, or chew, or go with girls who do.
Exactly. Right? So, you know, that included dancing and movies and cards and all these things, right? And so we don't have to deal...
Except for dancing.
We don't have to deal with our behavior, right? Because we've proven our faithfulness and our piety here. And that has been a struggle in holiness churches for several decades. And there's this whole history that kind of tracks with some of that and some world events and shifts in thinking and stuff. But you can kind of see it really becomes a problem in the 50s and 60s, right? As culture changes and you get to kind of the beginning of these culture wars and the drug revolution, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And our holiness is measured by the things we abstain from.
Yeah.
Now you can be, you know, an angry old coot. But I was sanctified at the altar, down at the camp, back on this date.
So I'm good.
I'm good. And I have abstained from all of these things.
I mean, this is what I wrote. I mean, isn't this what we see with the Pharisees?
Yeah.
Right? It's that old covenant. It's the law. I've checked all the boxes. Right?
I came and made the proper sacrifice, and I showed up at the temple, and I gave my money so that everyone saw. It is the root of almost every argument Jesus has with the Pharisees.
Yes. And again, so this comes back to the beauty of this medicinal or ontological atonement theory, right? That properly understands the law as a health regimen, a prescription to mitigate the effects of the disease, right? The disease of sin, right? The disease of sin, the law exists as a way of helping to mitigate its effects, kind of stave off the side effects of the disease, but the law can't deal with the root issue. It can't cure it.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ says. Again, talk about something subversive. Talk about something that is kind of flying under the radar, doesn't take much notice. Is, you know, that right there. But this is about dealing with a core issue that you can't see, you can't sense it, but it's, if you don't deal with that, you're never actually addressing the problem. You're just rehabilitating people. Is that the word? Rehabilitation?
Yeah. Rehabilitating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be careful how you say that.
But like you said, right, it's the notice, it's the motive, right? It's the idea of integrity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, why am I helping this person out? Is it so that people will see and maybe somebody will, you know, write an article about it in the local newspaper or, you know, put me on, you know, for my Instagram following. You're like, I'm helping this old lady change a tire. Okay, you know, you're like...
Yeah. You know, and you hit on something right there, I think. And again, this points back to the Christian character, to how it is we develop, but that integrity piece, right? I've known pastors, we've known pastors, I've known individuals and people, right, who can point to just how good a Christian they are, but you look at some of their behavior and you go, where's the integrity? And sometimes, in my opinion, the events of the last 18 months, or maybe a few years on that in some cases, has really revealed people's integrity.
Yeah.
And I have struggled with that. I mean, looking at going, you've got your system down, you've got your pieces in place, you've got your check boxes, but where's the integrity?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if that's where, again, right, if those things are in place, there will just be that natural subversive.
Right.
And again, I think we see that with Christ, right? I mean, it just is his interaction with people, where he goes, right? He's not easily offended. I mean, this just even goes back to, right, being self-differentiated, right? I know who I am. I'm confident in who I am. And so, right, if people aren't going to accept the message, guess what? We'll head to the next town where maybe they're going to be more open, right? And not call fire down from heaven to,
yeah,
right,
to burn them up, and yeah, you move along and let the chips fall where they may.
Well, and again, some of this too is the subversive nature of the kingdom of God. To not call down fire from heaven, to not make a big show of it, to not make a big deal of the problem that exists. That basically Jesus, every time he is confronted with, hey, let's make this public, let's make a big deal about this, and Jesus says, no, don't tell anybody about this healing. Keep it to yourselves.
Right.
Don't.
Yeah.
And he's pressed to step into some sort of public office, some sort of and he, no, that's not what this kingdom is about. Yeah. And we have to remember that, because again, you guys have already hinted at it, touched on it. We live in a very public, open kind of time in our society where everything is out there on social media.
Yeah.
Anything that in quotations matters ends up on social media, or it's on the news, and we have access to the famous people, the important people, on 24/7. Can get to them and see all kinds of stuff. And the kingdom of Jesus seems to operate at a very different pace than that. That it is much more quiet, it is much more subtle and subversive, where Jesus says you don't have to let your neighbor know everything that you're doing. Do some things simply because it is a part of your belief and your conviction about who God is and what he's done for you.
He teaches that, right? When you're praying, don't do a big spectacle of yourself, right? Do private, and when you fast, I mean, things like that. And again.
So good.
And yeah, it does. It's subversive. It's subtle. It's behind the scenes. I mean, and that is how God has always worked. Like, that's one of the things when you look at the story of the people of Israel. Israel wants to be like everybody else. So that desire to be like everybody else is expressed in the desire for kingship. The unexpressed desire there is for greatness, right? They want to be a great nation, a people like wealthy, all these things, right? They want greatness, and God tells them this isn't going to work out, and he kind of concedes all the way through. That theme exists all the way through, even where Jesus comes. He's ultimately, in part, crucified because he refuses to yield in to that celebrity, that greatness, that desire to be create a great kingdom. In their minds, he said, no, this is subversive. This is, right? And again, going back to his birth, right? Nobody's paying attention to it. And yet, why is it now, 2,000 years later, the church still has not learned some of the greatest, most effective, faithful work of the kingdom is not done in the big, oftentimes, as the last several years have shown us, time and time again, the celebrity pastors, the celebrity churches, that is not where the great work of the kingdom is happening. Now, are there good things that happen there? Sure. Are there things that are people's lives? Is God at work in the midst of that? Yes, I think more accurately, he's at work in spite of that.
In spite of, yeah.
But we just, I mean, and again, although the sort of people of Israel, you have the righteous remnant, right? It is the righteous remnant that is where the kingdom is seen, not in the great or not great kings. Mm-hmm. Even today, it's in the righteous remnant of the church, not the flashy one. See Mars Hill, see Harvest Bible Chapel, right? Fill in the blank. See Willow Creek.
Yeah. And like you said, right, it's always been the little guy, right? It's always been the underdog, right? Whether it's Moses and a speech impediment, Rahab, a prostitute, right? Little David taking on Goliath, right? I mean, like, Like
Or
the
a baby-
prophecy, like
or a
prophecy
baby born in a
says,
manger.
right? Yeah, little town of Bethlehem, right? It's this,
Yes.
yeah, or the little baby in a manger. Absolutely.
And I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but thinking that the parable of the mustard seed is one that just always, my mind always comes back to, right? You have the small, insignificant mustard seed, so small, in fact, that if you didn't know what it was, your eye probably wouldn't catch it as anything other than a crumb or fleck of dust.
Yeah.
And yet, that little seed produces something that has the capacity to do great harm in the wrong place, or produce a useful fruit in another place, as to take over a garden, right?
Yeah.
It's one little seed, and that's that story, the parable of the mustard seed. The kingdom, it's this little thing that seems insignificant, that if you didn't know what it was, you would completely overlook it, devalue it, and yet this one little thing here has the capacity to have immense impact.
Yeah.
And that's what always gets me. I knew a pastor who completely looked over the parable of the mustard seed, and he would pray for, he would use Old Testament passages like Habakkuk. Look, I'm going to do the utterly amazing things in our midst, right? Failing to realize that the utterly amazing thing God was going to do in their midst was bring Babylon to destroy them.
Yeah.
But that was used as a way of calling the church to being used to do great things by God. It's like that's not what that passage is talking about, and you have this beautiful parable over here that says what you're trying to say and so much more
Yeah.
in such a greater way, and you're missing it because of the language of greatness.
Well, and how many of those parables are right, like the vineyard or the farmer, right? You just better be hard at work, and when the master returns, boy, you better hope you forgot your nose to the grindstone and you're working,
Right.
Yeah.
right? That's what the master wants to see when he returns.
Yep.
Is that his workers have been faithful, they've been tending things, taking care of things, and
Yes. And that's and I don't know. Nathan and I had this conversation. It's been several weeks ago, and I asked him. All jokes aside, being younger, right, looking at this, I said, okay, here's what I'm hearing. Everywhere I go these days, it is conversations about that faithfulness, the work that we're doing, mission, right, being faithful to the mission, and it's often expressed in things like work for the poor and the marginalized, and bringing people who are not in community into community, right, this mission of the kingdom. And I said, I don't remember that from the 90s and early 2000s when I was growing up in church. So is this actually a new conversation or rediscovery, or is it just youthful naivete that I don't remember these conversations from growing up? And it seems to me that there really has been a shift in the church where we're beginning to realize these are conversations we didn't have to have because we just functioned and did church. And it wasn't until all of that started coming into question, now we're having to have some of these conversations and go, oh, geez, maybe we need to be doing some things differently. Maybe there's something to this mission and faithfulness. And
I'm sure it's multifaceted, but I think some parts of that is that as we see another generation pass away. I mean, I can't tell you how many funerals I've done in the last decade where you just go, yeah, they don't make men and women like this anymore, right? That's always usually part of my challenge. To go, okay, so what do we need to do then to become like Grandpa or Grandma? Because obviously they were faithful, right? They were, and again, we know not perfect. But that same thing, right? How do we continue to be that righteous remnant then? That obviously we've been passed down a faith, and we need to be found faithful to do the same thing. And I think so too. At least I think another part of it is where I seem to notice it. I think just is with the politically shifting winds, probably more. I don't know about necessarily, probably the Obama days, maybe even the Clinton days, and again, at least the more conservative Republican circles, I guess, that I've run in, where you go, oh, well, my party's not in charge, so let's be about the kingdom work. And you're like, yeah, okay. I'm not, again, motivation, right? I'm not sure if the integrity of motivation's there, but we're at least, I appreciated your comments Sunday morning about just helping us out over the last couple of years ago. And, I really do believe this is a picture of what the kingdom looks like, right? Your church had a need. I was able to come here and help. And Now, again, and I love my folks, you know, I think everybody heard it. Not sure if it penetrated or anything, but it is. And again, I keep coming back to this too. I think this last year and a half or 2 years or whatever has, I hope, taught us at least the basic lesson, right? We do need each other.
Yeah.
I don't care what the sign says out in front of your church, right? We're reading from the same book, love the same Jesus.
Yeah.
And boy, we had better, I don't know, yeah, we better come together. And again, because we're going to need, I think, probably more and more, this more subversive, subtle. We need to be have integrity, right? Be that righteous remnant.
Well, go ahead.
Well, and to that end, you and I know we had talked, I think, the day before, the morning of Sunday, that we were going to be talking out of and referencing the same piece of scripture out of Micah chapter 5.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's 2 through 7 that we were going to be sharing. At the very end of that, at the very end of verse 7, it talks about Bethlehem will be the chosen, the place where the Messiah will come from. It references Mary as being the one who will be in labor. And then at the very end, it says, and he will be your peace.
Yeah. 5:5. Verse 5.
Yes,
Chapter
yes,
5,
5, yes. So he
Not
will
to
be your peace.
Technical.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure someone would have corrected eventually.
Biblical. So-and-so.
I have a T-shirt, too.
So that nature of Jesus, Jesus being the root of the peace, is significant. It is critical to understanding the way that Jesus does everything that he does. That it is not about, again, this is why he refuses the political persuasions and the pushing. It's why he insists on going to Samaria instead of around Samaria. It's why he spends time, he talks with Zacchaeus instead of ignoring him like a good Jewish rabbi probably should have. The subtle, subversive, disruptive nature of Jesus is how we're supposed to live. Not for the gain of political power, but because that is what the kingdom of God looks like.
Or political power, nationality,
yes.
finances.
Yeah,
religious affiliation.
Yes. Fill in the blank with anything that gives us a false sense of peace.
Or cultural prominence. Cultural influence. The power that exists there. That's what I was going to say, right? As we continue to lose prominence within our world, and we are losing it and fast, the subversive will be the thing, right, that allows us to continue to shape culture.
Yeah.
Right? We won't have a megaphone anymore to try and shape culture with. We're going to shape it subversively by the people of God actively participating in the redemption of all things in their own neighborhoods. If your neighborhood doesn't look like the kingdom, let's start having conversations about how we as the people of God can make it so. And as we do that in this neighborhood, and the people of God do it in the next neighborhood, and so on and so on and so on, culture will be shaped, but it will not be done from the top down anymore.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. It wasn't all that effective when we were trying to do it. Here's looking at you, moral majority. Right? It wasn't all that effective. And as it turns out, most of those people trying to do it from the top down were scumbags.
I like Emperor Constantine. Shut your mouth.
I was thinking a little more recent.
I know, whatever.
But you know what I mean? Like,
you got the historical shirt, didn't you? No, theological.
Yeah.
Although historical, it
fits.
Sometimes that fits too. So anyway, thinking through that, if we don't learn to be subversive, this is what is it? Is it a parable or some statement Jesus makes? Right? You have to be cunning. I need the biblical.
Yeah.
Right? Be cunning
yes.
as a fox.
Yes.
Wise as serpents.
Wise as serpents.
Innocent as doves.
There you go. If we don't learn to do this, to be the shrewd manager, that's what I was thinking. The parable of the shrewd manager, right?
Yes.
If we don't learn to be a little more cunning, a little more shrewd, right, which is subversive.
Yeah. That's a good distinction. Those are subversive characteristics that Jesus specifically mentions.
That's why it's improv, folks. Why it's improv.
But isn't that
That's
interesting?
Good stuff. That'll preach.
Isn't
man.
that an interesting
Yeah.
parable?
Heck
Right?
yeah, dude.
All of these things about caring for the poor and teaching about being salt and light, all this stuff, and be shrewd about it. That's not one thing that kind of sticks. Sometimes you got to reconcile that with the correct everything else, but you realize That's the work, subversive. If we don't learn
Yeah.
to be shrewd and subversive,
It's no way to build a church. Can't build a budget, support a building.
I don't know about that, but certainly can't build an empire.
Well, hey, that's a good discussion.
That was not
That was
bad.
good. Yeah,
That's
that
not
was
bad.
good. So, hey, Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. We do hope and pray the peace of the Lord is upon you and your family. As we talked about, Micah 5:5. Your peace is only found in one place and in one person, and that's Jesus. Don't look for it anywhere else, because you will be sorely disappointed. So, God bless y'all. Thanks.